There is a lie you have told yourself since the moment you learned to speak. It is the word I. You use it with such confidence, such unwavering certainty, as if there were a solid, permanent entity residing behind your eyes. But look closer into the abyss of your own mind. The I who promised to change your life this morning is not the I who is currently scrolling in a trance. The I who loves is not the I who grows cold. You are not a person. You are a crowded marketplace of ghosts, each screaming for a turn at the steering wheel of your life. Every thought, every impulse, every fleeting emotion claims to be the whole of you, yet each vanishes as quickly as it arrived, replaced by another stranger who shares your name but none of your convictions. This is the first shattering truth of the Gurdjieff Protocol. The self you protect is a phantom, a fragmented collection of masks worn by a void. Before we descend further into this unraveling, you must decide. If you are seeking comfort, if you are looking for an awesome guide to self-improvement, leave now. This is not for the fragile. This is for the few who are tired of being a passenger in their own skin. If you are ready to witness the scaffolding of your prison, stay. Subscribe to this frequency of awakening and let us begin the work of remembering who you actually are. Let that sink in. You have spent your entire life defending a protagonist that doesn't exist. You have built a fortress around a hollow center. The tragedy is not that you are lost. The tragedy is that you are convinced you are home. To wake up, you must first accept that you are deeply, mechanically, and dangerously asleep. The dream is so vivid because you are the one spinning the silk. George Gurdjieff viewed the human being as a sophisticated biological machine. We do not do anything. Things happen to us. External stimuli strike our senses, and the machine reacts. A harsh word from a stranger creates anger. A pleasant scent creates nostalgia. There is no conscious choice involved, only a series of pre-programmed chemical and electrical responses. We are like clocks that have forgotten they were wound up, mistaking our ticking for a soul. Consider this: your body, your emotions, and your intellect are three separate centers, often working at cross purposes. Your mind decides to work, but your body feels heavy with lethargy, and your emotions are preoccupied with a perceived slight from yesterday. You are a house divided, a carriage where the horse, the driver, and the passenger speak different languages and have never met. This lack of coordination is the primary reason for your exhaustion. Now imagine the sheer amount of energy wasted in this friction. Because these centers are never aligned, you are in a state of constant leakage. Your vital force is drained by unnecessary tensions, by the noise of internal monologues that lead nowhere. You are a battery that is being short-circuited by its own design. This is the biological scaffolding of your dream, a prison built of habit, reflex, and the terrifying efficiency of your own nervous system. Picture this: every time you react instinctively to a situation, you are reinforcing the bars of your cage. The machine loves predictability. It thrives on the same arguments, the same fears, and the same hollow pleasures. To the machine, awakening is a threat to its equilibrium. It will use every tool at its disposal, boredom, skepticism, even physical discomfort, to pull you back into the warmth of the unconscious.
The sleep of humanity is a protective layer of anesthesia.
Inside this biological machine, there is no master. There is only a mob of servants who have forgotten their roles. Gurdjieff described man as a house where the master is absent and the servants have taken over. The cook is in the library burning books for warmth. The groom is in the kitchen trying to prepare a meal, and the footman is at the front door pretending to be the owner. Each one calls himself I, and each one is a liar. This is where the buffers come in, the hidden mechanism of your decay. A buffer is an internal partition, a psychological shock absorber that prevents you from seeing the glaring contradictions between your different selves. You can be a man of peace in the morning and a man of rage in the afternoon, and the buffer ensures you never feel the hypocrisy. It keeps your fragments separated so the house doesn't collapse from the weight of its own absurdity. These buffers are the ultimate tools of the matrix. They allow you to live in a state of permanent delusion. You believe you are consistent, you believe you are good, and you believe you are conscious, simply because you have lost the ability to feel the friction between your masks. Without buffers, the realization of your own fragmentation would be unbearable. It would feel like 1,000 mirrors shattering at once. Yet, this shattering is exactly what is required for the soul to begin its descent. Now, imagine a life where these partitions are stripped away. Imagine the suffocation of realizing that you have no permanent will. Every decision you have ever made was merely the result of the loudest servant screaming at that particular moment. You are a slave to the last person you spoke to, the last book you read, or the last meal you ate. The I is a revolving door, and until you stop the rotation, you will never find the center. To escape a prison, one must first realize they are in one. But for the human machine, the prison is not made of stone. It is made of habits, reactions, and the buffers we discussed. The Gurdjieff Protocol begins with a deceptively simple command: observe yourself. Not the you imagine yourself to be, but the machine as it functions in real time. You must become a spy in your own house, watching the way your hand reaches for a phone, the way your voice changes tone with different people, and the way your breath shallows when you are judged. Self-observation is not an act of judgment. If you judge what you see, you have already fallen back into the trap of a new I pretending to be moral. True observation is cold, clinical, and silent. It is the act of witnessing the three centers, the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving, as they clash and collide. You will notice that your thoughts are often irrelevant to your actions, and your emotions are frequently the result of physical exhaustion rather than external truth. Consider this: most of your life is lived through the moving center, a set of complex, learned reflexes that require no conscious presence. You walk, drive, and even speak while your mind is miles away, lost in a labyrinth of past regrets or future anxieties. By observing the physical tensions in your shoulders or the way you sit, you begin to pull the scattered fragments of your attention back into the present moment. This is the first crack in the foundation of your mechanical sleep. Now, imagine the difficulty of maintaining this state for even 60 seconds. you will find that the machine is remarkably adept at forgetting the observer. You will start to watch your breath, and within moments, a thought about tomorrow's dinner will sweep you away. This forgetfulness is the weight of the matrix. It is the gravitational pull of the unconscious. To stay awake is to fight a war against the very nature of your current existence. Let that sink in. If self-observation is the what, then self-remembering is the how. Gurdjieff taught that man never remembers himself. He only thinks or feels. Self-remembering is a dual arrow of attention. One arrow is pointed outward at the world, the task you are doing, the person you are speaking to. The second arrow is pointed inward toward the I who is doing the experiencing. You are simultaneously the actor and the witness, the dancer and the dance. Picture this. You are walking down a crowded street. Usually, you are identified with the street, the noise, the lights, the people. You have disappeared into the scenery. To self-remember is to suddenly realize, I am here, walking in this street. It is a momentary flash of lucidity where the subject and object are united. It is the only state in which you are truly alive. Everything else is just a biological process occurring in a vacuum of consciousness. This state is incredibly taxing. The human brain is not wired to sustain the dual arrow of attention for long periods. It prefers the ease of identification, the state where you lose yourself in a movie, a conversation, or a fit of anger. When you are identified, you have no I. You have become the movie. You have become the anger. Self-remembering is the act of reclaiming that lost energy, of refusing to let the external world consume your internal essence. Now imagine the power of a being who can remain present while the world around them is in chaos. Most people are like dry leaves blown by the wind of circumstance. A kind word makes them happy. A cold look makes them miserable. They are entirely reactive. Self-remembering creates a still point within the storm. It is the birth of the permanent will, a center of gravity that cannot be shaken by the flickering shadows of the matrix. To master the Gurdjieff Protocol, you must understand the 4 centers that govern your mechanical life: the intellectual, the emotional, the moving, and the instinctive. Each center has its own logic and its own speed. The intellectual center is the slowest. It ponders, weighs, and calculates. The emotional center is faster, capable of instantaneous shifts. The moving and instinctive centers are the fastest of all, managing thousands of complex biological functions without a single conscious thought. The tragedy of modern man is that these centers are constantly interfering with one another. We try to think our way out of an emotion, or we let an emotion dictate our physical health. We use the wrong tool for every job. You cannot solve an emotional crisis with logic, just as you cannot run a marathon with your intellect. This internal friction is where your vital energy is burned away, leaving you hollow and exhausted by the end of each day. Consider this. The Gurdjieff Protocol requires you to isolate these centers. Through rigorous self-observation, you begin to see which center is operating at any given moment. You notice when the intellectual center is pretending to be the emotional center, creating fake feelings based on ideas.
You notice when the instinctive center is triggered by a perceived threat that doesn't exist. This clarity is the beginning of internal harmony. It is the process of putting the servants back in their proper places. Picture this. As the friction decreases, a new kind of energy begins to accumulate. This is what Gurdjieff called fine hydrogens, the fuel required for the growth of the second body or the soul. In your current state, you are producing just enough energy to keep the machine running. There is no surplus for awakening. By stopping the leakage through the centers, you begin to build the pressure necessary for a phase shift in your consciousness. To execute the Gurdjieff Protocol in the modern age, you must understand the stroboscopic truth of your existence. Itzhak Bentov revealed that you disappear 14 times a second, a blink factor that defines the frequency of our reality. This constant flickering is the gap in the matrix, the moment where the still point exists between the creation and destruction of your physical form. By practicing the dual arrow of attention, you are attempting to catch yourself in that microsecond of non-existence, the absolute point where consciousness becomes reality. The first step in your protocol is the forbidden meditation of the still point. As you observe your breath, do not merely watch the air, watch the silence between the breaths. This is the zero-point energy field hiding in plain sight, the infinite energy source that the machine ignores to keep you in a state of scarcity. When you find this point, you are no longer a prisoner of the sound matrix that controls your thoughts. You are tapping into the biocircuitry of your own DNA, which acts as an antenna for higher frequencies. Now, imagine your spine as a biological coil, a coil theory of bioelectricity sleeping at its base. To wake up, you must utilize mental alchemy to transmute the raw lead of your reactive emotions into the gold of conscious presence. This is the 8th law they removed from the Kybalion, the law of conscious interference. By refusing to identify with your internal monologues, you are performing a polarity hack, transmuting fear into power through the sheer force of non-reaction. Consider this: your brain contains a God particle, or a Stargate function within the pineal gland that they have tried to hide from you. This is not a metaphor, it is a biological switch. When you stop trying to wake up, a quantum trap that only keeps you asleep, and instead enter the vibration of silence, this switch activates. You begin to perceive the language of light, the telepathic native tongue of the soul that predates the spoken word. Picture this: as you move through your day, you encounter the Jungian mirror, where your enemies are merely the externalized shadows of your own unintegrated self. The protocol requires you to use the shadow code to decode these encounters. Instead of reacting, you observe the amygdala hijack as it happens, refusing to let the biological switch keep you in the matrix. You are becoming a monster to find God, as Jung warned, descending into the mirror abyss to find the true self. The endgame of the Kali Yuga is unfolding in the 2025 timeline, a cosmic rebirth that demands your absolute presence. You are being forcibly disconnected from your matrix because the old sound matrix is decaying. But beware the lucid trap and the guardian entity waiting to stop your ascension between lives. They have hidden the map to the halls of Amenti within your own heart's torus field, the forbidden physics they don't teach in school. The Thoth prophecy warns of a coming battle for your soul, a battle fought not with weapons, but with frequency. Your sovereignty depends on your ability to escape the mentalism trap, the lie that your thoughts are your own. They are not. Most are echoes of the Watchers or the cosmic feedback loop controlling your reality. To escape is to realize that time does not exist. It is a simulation code designed to keep you trapped in a linear decay. Now imagine the freedom of no longer being a prisoner of the moon, no longer a biological machine reacting to external shocks. You are the architect of your own Atlantean God code hidden inside your bioelectric field. The Gurdjieff Protocol is the key to the still point, the only place where you can truly be. The universe is a conscious hologram, and you are the witness whose presence prevents the wave function from collapsing into a permanent prison. Let that sink in. Your house, your body, is a mirror of your soul. If it is rotting, it is because you have allowed the servants to rule. The void's revenge is not a punishment, but the ultimate weapon, the silence that strips away the false self. This is the end of the Philadelphia experiment trap, the consciousness deception that has kept humanity in a loop of suffering. You are now the master of the wild pendulum. Final challenge. Tonight, when you close your eyes, do not just sleep. Perform the still point technique. Watch the moment you disappear 14 times a second. If you can remain conscious for even one of those blinks, you have begun to exit the simulation. The Kali Yuga endgame is here. Will you remain a multitude of prisoners, or will you emerge as a singular sovereign light? The choice was always yours, hidden behind the God code of your own DNA.